Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another week's episode of the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. I'm excited about this week's episode with Huw Rothwell, who lives in Connecticut with his family and is originally from the UK in a town called Whitstable in Kent. As many listeners know, I enjoy having military veterans on the show, and Huw is actually a British Army vet, having served as an infantry officer before starting a family and eventually coming to the US for work. Huw is a 50-state highpoint completer with great stories of his favorite peaks, but my favorite part in this episode is when Huw talks about how he got into the outdoors and mountaineering. He has some unique opportunities in the UK that I know listeners will appreciate just as much as I did. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice a picture at the end of the episode with Huw on Bora Peak with another mountaineer. And if you're wondering, is that Huw with one of the greatest mountaineers of all time, Ed Viesturs? The answer is yes, it is. And I was surprised when I saw that picture myself, as Huw doesn't mention it in the episode. But then I realized it's just part of his character. He's a humble person who has achieved extraordinary things in his life. And on a separate note, this will be the last podcast until December. My husband and I are going to have our first child soon, and I'm taking time off to focus on our new family. So I will still be conducting podcast interviews during that time. I simply won't be editing and publishing them until December, as that part is the most time consuming. So if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to me via the podcast email that you can find in the show notes. It's been a fun year of talking to high pointers and getting all their stories out. See you soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. And the high pointer that we're speaking with today is Huw from Connecticut. Huw, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now, the listeners will hear an obvious accent that is not American. And I know that I just said Huw is from Connecticut, but he is actually was born and raised in the United Kingdom. And he is a British Army veteran, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So before we get into high pointing, can you just fill us in on how you made your way over here?
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me on the show, Lauren. I feel very honoured to be on here. How did I end up in the US? I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but so I grew up in the UK. I went off and joined the British Army at 18, and went to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which is kind of like the British equivalent of West Point. Mm-hmm. And after sort of graduating from there, I spent 8 years as a infantry officer. And then started, myself, my wife, Louise, got pregnant and we're having a kid. And so I made the conscious decision to leave the military after 8 years and got into the world of executive search and talent development work. And then after a couple of years of doing that, my company asked if I wanted to go to New York for a 2-year secondment, and so I happily agreed to do that, and here I am 22 years later.
That's awesome. Well, we're happy to have you here in the U.S.
Well,
I'm assuming you're a citizen by now.
I am a citizen now. Yeah,
that's so cool. So you're a dual citizen.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So now, did your exposure to the outdoors come in the UK or while you were serving in the Army?
I mean, all of the above. I'd describe myself as a lifelong mountaineer. When I was very young, my father would sort of take me on backpacking trips around the wet, cold hills that you get in the UK. And then as I sort of got older, I was, started doing independent trips with friends. We'd go mountaineering in Snowdonia, in Wales, or up in the Lake District. And then when I was about 16, I was very fortunate to get selected for a sort of British Schools Exploring Society expedition to the Himalayas. And so, wow. I was climbing almost 6,000 meter mountains, or 20,000 wow. feet, in the Western Himalayas as before I was 18. And then after, well, then I joined the army, and the British Army is, very, very good at sort of encouraging its sort of young soldiers and officers to take soldiers away on adventurous trips when you're not, actively deployed anywhere. And so I took full advantage of that over the course of my career, and really, really enjoyed, taking sort of friends and soldiers off to, where did we go? We went to Mount Kenya. We went to South Georgia, which is sort of down in the Antarctic, and we retraced Shackleton's route across the island. We did lots of sort of ice climbing up in British Columbia, in Canada, and a few other sort of fun little projects like that, sort of interspersed with operational tours.
Well, that's fascinating, and that's really great leadership training as well.
Yeah, and a few scrapes along the way.
Yeah.
And then after sort of leaving the army and moving to the US, as a family, much like I was sort of, taken on hikes by my dad and parents when I was a young kid, my wife and I have done the same with our children. And so really, without ever realizing that we were high pointing, we'd take the kids and we'd do the sort of, northeastern high points, really just as a matter of course, and on holidays, and on Sundays we'd climb sort of Frizzell, and we went up Mount Mansfield, and we went up Mount Washington, and so we did a few of these early ones without ever knowing what high pointing was, or thinking we were high pointing. We just like climbing mountains. And so, then it, after a few years of doing that, it sort of became a little bit more obsessive, shall we say.
Sure. Well, I hear a lot of people in the East Coast say that they stumbled into high pointing, or it was kind of an accidental endeavor. They didn't know that it was a thing until they maybe just walked up and saw the geological survey marker. Yeah.
No, and I think for me, it's sort of, I always sort of say it's sort of taken me 22 years to climb all 50 of the high points. But I think after doing it for 10 years, no, sorry, I'm wrong. It took me 16 years to get to 10.
Okay.
And so, you could argue that it wasn't an obsession at that point, but then in the next 2 years, I did 38. So there was a definite sort of flip from passive, occasional hobby to, obsessive mountaineering.
Sure. Yeah, it's a goal. Now,
absolutely.
You mentioned, and I don't want to just walk past this, you mentioned an explorers club that you were a part of in school. Yeah. That sounds fascinating, and what great exposure to the mountains at such a young age. Can you talk about how that influenced you?
Oh, I mean, it hugely influenced me. I mean, so the name of the organisation is or was the British Schools Exploring Society.
Wow.
It's now called the British Exploring Society, and it's aimed at sort of 16 to 18-year-old children. You've got to raise a boatload of money, but then you get to go off on some sort of really life-changing trips. Yeah. And this particular trip that I did was to the sort of western Himalayas of India. And so, we were it was my first time out of Europe. It was my first time on a long distance flight. There's probably about 60 or 70 kids of a similar age to myself. And we spent, I think, a total of about 6 weeks in the Himalayas. We were in sort of Kashmir, we were in Ladakh, and we climbed, doing a lot of trekking. We climbed several mountains of sort of 15,000 feet, and then one mountain, Stock Kangri, which was almost 20,000 feet. I did that on my 17th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Which was, I came back from there having been surrounded by other kids that, were similarly excited about mountaineering. And, got back, and the next year, with a few buddies from that trip, we went and climbed in the French Alps, Mont Blanc and one or two other ones
Wow.
in the Alps. So I think prior to the Himalayan trip, my experience had all been very sort of small scale UK centric, and this just blew it off the charts. And then a lot of the stuff that I did while I was in the army, definitely continued that sort of vein of pushing the boundaries from a expedition and mountaineering perspective.
That is fascinating. And I think the younger somebody is that has exposure to that level of expeditions, I think the better.
Yeah.
Gosh, wow, that is so cool. And of course, the British are known for being explorers, of course, between Shackleton and Hillary and all that. So I'm sure that's a huge part of, the classes maybe that come along with these expeditions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just growing up on a small island. You're sort of,
Yeah.
People are excited to get off the place and see what's out there. And
Mm-hmm.
when I grew up, I had a poster of Everest, on my wall, and all of the books I read were sort of adventure and mountaineering,
Yep.
and military stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it massively influenced my choices.
Of course. And then, getting into your military training, I can speak for the U.S. Army by saying that there are certain units that specialize in mountain training in our military. And of course, that's dependent on where you're stationed and what your focus is in terms of your job in the military. I was never a part of those units, but regardless of where you are in the Army and what you do, it does teach you how to suffer.
Yes.
And that's a big part of being in the outdoors and being in the mountains, especially on longer expeditions. And I think in our phone conversation that we had before this recording, I mentioned how we've created a world of comfort at least in the first world. And it's so interesting to think about how we actively seek to escape that and almost ask to suffer in order for a reward. And then we come back, to the office or to the classroom, whatever our occupation is. But it's interesting how we search for that escape even when we leave the military.
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, since leaving the military, I've been, behind a desk. It's been, air conditioned offices, very, very sort of civilized life. And,
Yeah.
I think what sort of kept me climbing mountains since leaving the military has just, I've sort of I've missed the suffering in a weird way. I miss being sort of dirty and wet and cold and tired, and drinking coffee at 2 o'clock in the morning. About to go off and summit a mountain. For me, I think it just gives you a really lovely balance on life where it's nice to be warm, it's nice to be dry, it's nice to put some food in a microwave and press go. But the sort of counterpoint to that is it's lovely to be living a simple life in the mountains with everything you need on your back, and and I think also as well, having a bit of that sort of type 2 fun. It just makes the beer at the end seem a lot more rewarding.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely deserve it. And I think there's a reward whether you get to the top of the mountain or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it is, and I for me, that's one of the sort of key reasons why I love going into the mountains, and and also taking family and friends, and being with people that I really care about and enjoy being with. So good company, doing what we love, beautiful views, a bit of misery and uncomfortableness, and then some good stories to relay afterwards.
Sure. And as you've probably seen by doing all the high points in the United States, they're not all a bunch of sufferfests, but still they're fun and they're memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have more of a cross spectrum of mountains if you tried, really, could you?
Yeah. So now let's fast forward. You get to the States and you settle down with your family in Connecticut and you start high pointing throughout the Northeast. So what turned it around for you and for your family? When did you start saying, okay, I want to be a high pointer, or I am a high pointer and I want to work to complete them?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I started, high pointing without knowing it in 2001. And, I think it was a family holiday up in Maine about 10 years later. And, my kids were really young and no one wanted to go and climb Katahdin. And so I'm like, do you know what? I'll get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, drive the 3 or 4 hours from where we were staying to the mountain, climb the mountain, had a great day, and back, in time for, dinner with the kids at the end of the night. I
Yeah.
think that's probably the point when it sort of flipped from an unconscious hobby to the beginning of an obsession.
Are you a member of the High Pointers Club?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've been a member for, gosh, a few years now, and sort of subscribe. I'm on the Facebook group. I get the A through Z magazine
Oh,
regularly as
good.
well, and I also owe them an article about my 50 high point journey as well.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, you know how to get it to them. They've been on the show.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So we lived in Connecticut for a number of years. We then moved down to Houston, or Katy in Texas, and then that kind of opened up the Western US to us. So my oldest daughter Charlotte and I, we went and climbed Guadalupe,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful mountain. It's one of my favorite peaks, and the whole area around it is just such a beautiful part of the world.
Mhm.
So we did that one, and then we did a couple of family road trips where we went up Wheeler Peak, and we tried to get up Elbert, but failed to get up Elbert. And so by that stage I'd probably done about 10 or so.
Okay.
And then I was just like, not many people have done this. There are some awesome mountains on the list, whether it be not just the Denalis, but, the Hoods, the Rainiers, the
Yeah.
Gannets, Granites, etc. There are
Yeah.
some really wonderful mountaineering objectives, as well as going to parts of the country that you'd never go to otherwise. I mean,
Exactly.
and that you've done a bunch as well. I mean, that's also one of the attractions. I think there's real joy out of some of the more random ones.
You're right. And I'm interested in your perspective as, coming from the UK. I can speak for Americans by saying we kind of know what to expect when we go to an area that we've never been to, but we've studied geography, we know about the culture of the place we're going to. What was your experience going to these rather remote places?
Yeah, and probably a great example of that is a really good friend of mine, Rob and I. We were going up Panorama Point in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're in the middle of nowhere and we're driving on dirt roads, and there's this sort of, as you get closer to the high point, there's this sort of massive herd of bison
Oh yeah,
in the way.
that's a very
And
American experience.
yeah, and I was surprised by how big the bison are, because they're,
Mm.
several times bigger than a, normal cow. But
Yeah.
they were just blocking the route to the high point, and we were like, this would make a first failed ascent where bison have stopped you summiting. Um, but we were lots of honking the horn. They eventually moved, and we got to the top. But it was
Mhm.
just, it's you're in the middle of the country, in the middle of nowhere, and there's a massive herd of bison blocking the route, and you couldn't get more American if you tried, really.
Yeah, you're right. That's so cool. I have never run into a herd of bison, and I've lived here almost all my life. So
Yeah.
you got that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So how many of these have you done with your family?
So I've probably done 10 or 12 with my family, and some we've done all of us, some we've just done with my wife Louise. I'm still trying to nurture and guide and encourage the rest of them to attempt the 50, but there
Yeah.
are differing levels of interest in the project. So I've done, a good proportion of them, including some of the tougher ones. My wife and I did Mount Whitney, in a 24
Oh,
hour,
yeah.
in a 1 day thing, which was brilliant. That same holiday, we also did Boundary, and we did the one in Arizona. The name escapes me for the
Oh,
second. But
Humphreys Peak.
Humphreys, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We did that as a week holiday, and my wife did make the mistake of saying it's been the best holiday of her life, which I do remind her about. But I can't see them on Rainier or a Denali or anything like that. I've also done a bunch of them with friends.
Sure.
I have a sort of climbing partner, Rob, that he and we've done most of the sort of hard ones together,
Hmm.
as well as a few sort of long distance road trips. And I've also done a bunch of them by myself,
Hmm.
where I've had, a couple of weeks off between a job, and I'd, zip out to Hawaii to snag that one, or I'd do
Wow.
a Appalachian tour,
Hmm.
just to get them done when the opportunity's there, really.
Yeah. So what are some of your personal favorite high points?
Wow. So I think Denali is probably my favourite, and the reason for it is, there's a long list of favourites, but I think
Hmm.
Denali takes the gold medal because it's a full on expedition. I mean,
Yeah.
we were on the mountain. We did a guided ascent with RMI.
Okay.
We were on the mountain for 19 days. We had, it's the perfect example of embracing the slog, the type 2 fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work, but you're in such a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
A couple of things that were quite interesting from that trip. We had an earthquake while we were there, a 6.1 earthquake.
Oh my
That
gosh. What year was this?
This was 2021.
Wow.
And we were at the 11,000-foot camp, and Rob was fast asleep in the tent next to me, and all of a sudden there's a huge crash and waves going through the ground, and
Oh, wow.
I thought that a Sirac had broken off.
Yeah.
But actually it was the earthquake, and you could really sort of feel the ripples going through the glacier. That caused Sirac to fall off. But my
Sure.
friend didn't even wake up. I'm like, we just been through an earthquake, and he's like, oh, what? And we had the sort of classic Denali experience of being stuck at the 14,000-foot camp for the best part of a week because, partly for acclimatization reasons, but also, just
Weather.
because the weather conditions were miserable. And,
Yeah.
doing the 3 days in a tent where you're just reading and listening to music and watching Netflix and, just chatting is all
Hmm.
part of the journey. And, but then conversely, above 14 camp, we had an absolute breeze. It was the day going up the fixed ropes to high camp was a beautiful, clear day. Summit day, was described by the guides as you'll never have a summit day on Denali like this. We had a
Wow.
beautiful summit day, and so I think that the whole experience of that, the fact there's no darkness at all,
Yeah.
from leaving Connecticut to getting back to Connecticut, I didn't see darkness,
Wow.
which is pretty cool. So there are loads of great mountains, but Denali is a wonderful expedition.
That's fascinating. I have to ask, would you do it again?
I probably would. If my wife or one of my kids wanted to do it, I would probably do it again. It's hard work, and because it's not just your time on the mountain, it's also all the training and the preparation needed to get there. So I must admit, I did feel quite burned out for a couple of weeks after I got back.
Sure.
And I was sleeping like I was a teenager, and eating like a horse for about 3 weeks after I got back, just to sort of to let my body recover a bit.
Sure. Well, and what makes Denali unique, I think, is that there's no porters, there's no Sherpa. It's you and everything that you need for that expedition.
And it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I like asking that question because not everyone had, as flawless of an expedition as you did, and great weather. And whenever they talk about Denali, it's just like, oh, never going back. And it was something that they did just to complete either the 7 summits or the 50 high points. And they just have these terrible memories. Or if they do go back, it's because they didn't summit. Yeah. And they can't sleep until they do.
Yeah.
But that's good.
I have a friend that has tried 3 times without success, and indeed there were a couple of people on our trip that had it was their second attempt on the mountain. So
really,
we were super lucky, and sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not really.
Sure. What was the date that you summited?
Oh gosh, it was June. I want to say maybe like the 17th of June, 2021.
Okay. So about mid-season.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and and my friend and I mean, we'd specifically, RMI ran 7 trips. We specifically chose the one in the middle because we figured that probably was the best from an odds perspective, and it was because the year that we did it. Every trip before us and us summited, and no trips after us summited. So, definitely pick the middle of the season would be my advice.
For sure. It's always a risk going in the shoulder seasons. I did that once on Mount Whitney. I went at the end of March. I wanted to do the Mountaineers route when there's snow, and I just got caught in a storm, and it was bad. So we got off the mountain. I went back in July. There wasn't a drop of snow on that mountain. It was like climbing stairs.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the fun and the joy of doing this is it is the failures as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
It's there's nothing like a bit of failure that sort of sharpens the sort of desire to get up it next time round.
You're right, and it does help in I know a lot of people don't like this word, but expectation management.
Yeah.
And you have to know going into an expedition, especially if it's guided, because there's way more red tape there, that you might get turned around. You might not make it up. And that is just a reality. And there's no better way of learning that than having it happen to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew the bad weather was coming because I was watching the weather the whole time. But I've never been like in a storm on a mountain. And I just remember the tents, we're laying in our tents at night, and it was the roof of the tent was hitting my face. That's how strong the wind was. I was like, gosh, this is serious. And even if the guide said, hey guys, let's go summit, I would have been like, are you sure? I don't feel good about this. So there was no tension there, between the clients and the guides. It was like, yeah, we want to get off here.
Yeah, I think and I've been super fortunate. I mean, I've used guides on Denali, Rainier, Granite, and Hood, and on all of those, I've summited first time, and the guide, and sometimes in quite marginal conditions, and it was the guides making absolutely the right decisions allowed us to summit. And so, I've had great experiences every time I've used a guide. I also
likewise,
I enjoy going without guides too, but that's
Of
another
course.
story.
Of course. I use guides when I don't know the area I'm going to. And I had a guide on the show, Mike Haugen from RMI.
Yeah,
And he explained that you'd be surprised at some of the conditions that they will take clients up in. You could, because they know the weather pattern so much better than we do.
yeah,
I remember being on Rainier and asking my guide, how many times have you summited? And she goes, this will be 57. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
we're good.
yeah. We did it on Rainier where normally people, so I did the Emmons route, and
Oh, okay.
normally people will sort of set off at 1 o'clock in the morning to summit,
Yeah.
and the weather conditions at that time were horrendous for us. But we actually did a daytime ascent. So because it was pretty cold, I think we set off at 7-8 o'clock in the morning, and did it that way. And again, it was just the guides making the absolute right call on the conditions, allowed us to summit.
You're right. They're very calculated. And I think, if you had gone up by yourself, let's say, and the weather was terrible at 1 a.m, maybe you would have turned around.
Yeah. Or not left the tent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Can you talk about the Emmons route? I've never done that.
Yeah, it's it's a slog. It's definite type 2 fun. I mean, you start off at I think it's the White River trailhead, around 4,000 feet, and then it's a sort of, the trip I did, we did sort of, the first night we basically got to Snowline and sort of camped at Snowline. And then the second night we went up to, I think it's called Camp Sherman, where there's a sort of, like a ranger sort of building there. And there's a few sort of crevasse fields to cross to that point, but nothing too horrendous. And then basically just takes you, to the base of the Emmons Glacier, and it's just a sort of careful slog, up through the glacier, right up to the ridge, and where you sort of come out on Columbia Crest is literally right at the true summit of Rainier. So you don't have to do that bit where you walk for an hour
across the crater.
Yes. Yeah. So we didn't get to do that, which I guess might have been quite fun, but it was nice to get to the sort of proper top, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And I'm going to edit this out because I'm not proud of it, but I did not take that walk across crater. I did the DC route.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't edit this. Maybe I'll just be wide open about it. But I did the DC route, and some days it's a long day, and we got up there and we're all kind of tired, and we had to decide as a group, do we want to walk across for this extra 1 foot? And I said no. We had a half hour on the top, and I'm like, I want to sit here and eat a Snickers bar. that was my decision. I was confident in it. And then the certificate that they gave me did not say 14,411 feet. It said 14,410, and that's where I stayed. So at least the certificate didn't lie.
Are you happy with the decision you made, though?
Oh yeah.
Then that's all that matters.
You're right. But I just remember how rocky that route was, the DC route. I was not expecting that at all. I mean, I would say more than half of the route from 11,000 feet from our camp there was just hearing your crampons scrape against rocks.
Wow. Yeah, because on the Emmons route, there was one tiny bit where you were sort of traversing around the side of a cliff that you were on rock, but 98% of the route was once you were on snow was on snow.
Okay. And I'm sure a lot of that is weather dependent. I went kind of towards the end of the season, and they did have to close the season down early when I went in 2021 because it was melting so quickly. And I think they did that again this year.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you talk about, and this is another perspective that I'm interested in since you're British, the American road trips that you've done? As you've probably gathered by now, we love our road trips.
Yeah.
And it's a great American pastime. What has your experience been?
Oh, I think it's I embrace them. I enjoy them as well. I've done probably actually I've probably done about 4 pretty big road trips.
Okay.
In the course of my sort of high pointing journey. From Katy in Texas, we did the whole sort of classic southern, is it the Southern 6-pack or something, where Louisiana, Arkansas,
Oh, yeah.
Mississippi, Florida.
Yeah, they're basically on along the interstate.
Yeah, my friend Rob and I, we did that. I think it was a 2,400 mile journey in 4 days.
Wow.
One of us would be driving until the car was empty of gas, would fill up, would switch over, grab whatever road food we could find, and can continue to the next one. But we had some great experiences. We stayed, in the in the old sort of Elvis Hotel in Memphis. We stayed at the Jimmy Buffett Hotel in Pensacola, and so we did some really cool stops as well, and had some fun dinners, and a couple of beers in the evening, as well as just enjoying the sights and sounds of life on the road, and I think because it's such a big country, once you're away from the big cities, you can generally, there's not a lot of traffic, you can zip along,
Yeah.
you can cover big distances. So that was a favorite one. I also from Texas did one where we went up through New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. Did it. That was a huge, and that was a beautiful road trip, because that was
Yeah, it is.
that was really my sort of first time properly out west, and so just loving the sort of desert landscapes, and New Mexico in particular is a place I think is just a really cool state, because you've got the Rockies, you've got deserts, you've got that sort of Mexican influence, you've got all the chili, you've got the beautiful buildings in Santa Fe. I mean, it's a really amazing place.
I agree.
So those would be some of the highlights, and
Yeah.
I think not all road trips are fun. I did the Midwestern, I don't know, 6 or 7, all around the Midwest, where there was an awful lot of driving, not much hiking, but there are still some cool sights on the way.
Sure. Yeah. So my next question was going to be, what's your favorite part of the country? I'm assuming it's New Mexico, Colorado, Utah.
Wow. It would definitely be. It's got to be the Rockies, really, which I appreciate runs the length of the country. I think New Mexico and Taos and around
It's my
there.
favorite.
It's wonderful. Also loved. We stayed in Flagstaff, Arizona, when we did Humphreys, and that was gorgeous part of the world. So I'd definitely say that part of the country, because it's just stunning peaks. The weather is typically not humid. Clear nights. I mean, it's just a lovely part of the world.
Yeah, and I'm coming from Arizona, and I've got to say that it's just such a fascinating state, because you can be in Flagstaff and surrounded by aspen, and then you drive a couple hours south and there's saguaro cacti everywhere. I love the desert. I miss it.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's like 112 degrees. But that can stay there. But
yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. So, are there any high points that didn't go as expected?
Well, there've been a few along the way. It took me 3 goes to get up Gannett Peak.
Okay.
The first time was, we had really sort of deep snow conditions on top of the ridge above the Bergstrand, where we just felt it was unsafe to continue. So even though we were touching distance to the mountain or to the summit, we had we made the call to turn around.
Okay.
The second time on Gannet, my climbing partner slipped crossing one of the streams and ended up damaging his shoulder.
Oh gosh.
So that, because of where we were, and the sort of injury to his shoulder, we were sort of we had to get a heli pickup on that one.
Wow.
Because we couldn't, he couldn't really sort of move with his backpack. He was in quite a lot of pain, and we weren't sure the extent of the damage. And so, we ummed and ahed for a bit, and then, ultimately sort of pressed the SOS button, on our sort of inReaches. And, it's sort of quite humbling because, we hadn't even got to the technical bit of the mountain. This was just an innocuous slip, crossing a stream and falling onto a shoulder. So that was definitely one that didn't go according to plan.
For sure.
But it was really good to get back this summer and, finally summit it. Gannet is one of my least favorite mountains, but also one of my favorite mountains at the same time. It's a bit of a pig. We've got a bit of history with it. And
that's like your Denali. Most people have to go back to Denali so many times.
Yes, yeah, very true. I guess on the high points, it sort of, swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Some go according to plan and others don't. And, there've been a couple of others on the way. I mean, I think probably 5 or 6 of the peaks have taken more than one go to summit just because of, weather. Weather would be the sort of the key reason why.
So now that you've done all 50 state high points, what is next?
What is next? Well, first priority is a beach holiday. I've never really been a massive beach holiday fan. Always loved getting out into the mountains, but I think after finishing the 50, I need a little rest, and then
well deserved.
And then we'll focus on some other mountaineering projects. Not quite sure what. Maybe something in South America, possibly. We shall see.
Okay, maybe some Mexican volcanoes.
Yeah, maybe Mexico or maybe Aconcagua or something like that. That could be in the future potentially.
Well, I always like to close out with the same few questions, but since you are a unique guest in that you're coming from the UK, I do have to ask you about our national parks and what you think, because as an American, it's one of the things that I love most about our country is how we preserve the land and make it accessible to the people. And from what I understand, it's a trend that started to kind of spread around the world, calling parks national parks and designating them as that. So what do you think about ours?
I think, I think they what you have in the US, it reflects, the diversity of geography and ecosystems within the US, so whether it be Denali National Park, whether it be the Everglades, whether it be, anything in between the two, you've got this real cross spectrum of absolute natural beauty. I think that the national park system, the wardens, is wardens the right word? Rangers,
park rangers,
park rangers. It's a very dialed in system. If I had one slight criticism, I might say it's sort of maybe a little bit sort of bureaucratic with, needing to get sort of, permit. Whitney's a classic example with the lottery and things like that, and possibly it's a bit over-regulated, but equally I understand that, they need to protect delicate mountain environments, and, they do that by sort of, limiting numbers of people there.
It's a difficult balance to achieve, I think, because it's difficult because the purpose of the national parks is to be accessible to all the people.
Yes.
And then when you have to find out that you need a permit to get in, and you have to apply for the permit a couple months in advance, and then the website shuts down on the day that you're supposed to apply. It's a lot of bureaucratic red tape sometimes, but I like to go on the off seasons.
Yeah, no. I think that's the best way to do it for sure. But no, I think that they're absolute national treasures.
Yeah, yeah. I like to, when I can, when I'm high pointing, combine it with a national park. And then
Yeah.
something that I've started doing is high pointing or finding the high point of that national park. Some national parks are high points like Mount Rainier or Denali. But for example, I went to New River Gorge in West Virginia a couple of weeks ago. We found the high point and just stood on it. It's nothing, you know.
Oh,
It's like it's next to the parking lot. But I'm like, oh, this is fun too, you know.
it sounds like another list that people can
It's
do.
exactly. High pointers love lists and we love maps.
Yes.
Yeah. So how has high pointing enriched your life personally and your family's life?
Yeah. I think just from a sort of personal life, I mean, as we're all, getting older in life, for me, the training that you do for these trips, the actual trips themselves, it gives you a purpose and a reason for staying fit.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're spending money on guided services, you don't want to not summit because of your personal lack of fitness. And so, just in a simplistic way, for me, it gives me a reason to, chuck a pack on my back at weekends and get out into the Connecticut hills and, repeat.
Yeah, it's the best workout.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think also it is what I love. Throughout my life, it's what I've loved doing, and it is a bit of a sort of love-hate relationship. I call it an annual cycle where you come off a mountain, you're like sick of mountains, sick of wearing a backpack, you throw it in the corner, and then 2 or 3 months later, you're like, ooh, what's next year?
Yeah.
What are we going to do next year?
Yeah.
And then from a family perspective, I've had the real privilege of, climbing a number of mountains with whether it's my wife or wife and kids or with really, really close friends. And it's, time together in the mountains where you're away from cell phones and you're staring at the stars at night and just having quality time and having adventure with, friends and family.
Yes, I agree. So are there any outdoor based books, podcasts or documentaries that you would recommend?
Well,
Or what are some of your favorites?
yeah. So because I've listened to, a lot of episodes that you've produced, Lauren, I knew you were going to ask this question. And so I thought, right, I need to come up with a British theme for this. So,
oh, perfect. Perfect.
So one of my favorite adventurers is a guy called Ranulph Fiennes.
Okay.
And so he's now in his 70s and has been doing hardcore expeditions, since the 1970s. And there are a couple of his books in particular I'd recommend. So one of them is called Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know, which is basically a bit of a sort of autobiography of his. He's got, quite a sort of colourful life. He's sort of also former British military, done some cool stuff, and then started doing expeditions as a way of life since leaving the military. It's sort of like, the life I wish I could have done. And then he also he wrote another book that came out a couple of years ago, and it was a biography of Shackleton. So Shackleton is another one of my heroes, and Ranulph's book about Shackleton is just really insightful, and I find it's a much easier read than South, which is the sort of the classic, Shackleton book. So Ranulph Fiennes is one to look out for, and then from a podcast perspective, Kenton Cool does a brilliant series of podcasts. So he's the British guy that has climbed Everest 17 times, more than any other Westerner.
Wow.
And then there's another one called the Adventure Podcast by a guy called Matt Pycroft, who, he interviews, he's a journalist, but he interviews lots of leading mountaineers from around the world, and just has a really good sort of interview style and asks really sort of probing, searching questions. So those would be a couple of recommendations.
Oh, those are great. And I appreciate the British theme. Well, Huw, thank you so much for being on my show and for, opening up to the listeners. This is a really cool story about your life and your past and, your present. And I don't know what lies in the future in terms of your expeditions, but I wish you all the best.
Yeah, well, there will be more for sure, but I think beach holiday is the next priority.
That's awesome.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Lauren, thank you for allowing me to come on your show. It's a real honour and privilege to do it, and best of luck with the show, and best of luck with your upcoming sort of parenthood as well.